iPhone 13 Pro as my daily phone since its release. I'm here to give you my 6-month impressions and review after having a lot of time with it and noticing all the different quirks and features, as well as kind of my wish list for the next generation iPhone 14. So if you guys like videos on Apple content as soon as it comes out, as well as consumer tech in general, just make sure you go ahead and subscribe to the channel, drop a thumbs up on the video, and leave a comment down below as to what you would like to see on the next generation iPhone. So it's no secret that the iPhone 13 lineup is more of an iterative upgrade. The design itself stayed very similar to the iPhone 12, and the general form factor is essentially identical from a distance, aside from some small changes when it comes to the front notch, and the overall weight did increase a little bit. A lot of the other features though are kind of under the hood, and some of which have made a pretty impactful difference on like an everyday use basis, especially from the perspective of, I would say, a pretty heavy user like myself. So I think one of the biggest differences across the board that was especially noticeable on the iPhone 13 and the 13 mini, but was also attributed to the iPhone 13 Pro and Pro Max, is the battery life. The battery life on the previous generations weren't exactly bad, but for someone who uses their phone for work every single day and is on it about 8 to 9 hours of screen on time, I was never able to get a full day of battery life with the smaller iPhones, including the 12, the 12 Pro, and I pretty much did use a larger model of iPhone for many years up until this year. I would say the battery life of the iPhone 13 Pro, from my experience, is able to last the entire day, and that couple hours definitely makes a difference. I usually start checking my phone just around 8 to 9 a.m. and I find around 7 p.m. is where I hit that 20% mark. So I would say that is pretty respectable, and in terms of the size, I'm pretty happy with the decision to go with the iPhone 13 Pro as opposed to the 13 Pro Max. And one of the reasons was because of the weight. That is definitely an area that is a little bit noticeable, and although not drastic, when on your phone all day, I found that having the smaller size was a lot more manageable. And for those who are wondering, after 6 months of usage at a pretty heavy load, my peak battery performance capability is still at 100%, which is pretty impressive. The MagSafe features that were introduced on the iPhone 12 are definitely ones that I use as well. I like the accessories, and with the growing ecosystem of camera mounts, tripods, phone vents, and all that kind of stuff, I do have a pretty good collection of MagSafe accessories, but when it comes to charging, I still don't find myself using MagSafe that much. It is able to reach 15 watts, but I just find that the phone gets very, very hot when I do use the MagSafe, but occasionally it is still nice to have. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the general performance and reliability of the phone. This phone has the A15 Bionic chip, and Apple's obviously been pretty far ahead in terms of real-world performance and efficiency over the years. They've never been the highest spec option on the market on paper, but from a performance perspective, I have never really had an issue with the flagship iPhone for quite a few years now. So in terms of what I do on my phone, I'm on social media most of the time, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, as well as email, and none of that is going to need a lot of power. But at the same time, I do also import my photos from my Leica, which are about 48 megapixels, over to apps like Lightroom and VSCO, and occasionally I also color grade some of the real vlogs on VSCO as well, and the performance throughout has been pretty good. I did observe in certain apps like Lightroom, where in the past the phone would heat up quite a bit or dim the screen, that on this generation of iPhone, it never really heat up when I was exporting a ton of photos, but I did notice the screen does still dim occasionally, but I think that is more specific to the app itself. The only time I would say I'd ever notice any performance hiccup is not really related to the chip itself, but I have a ton of photos on my phone. I believe it's 30,000 of them. And when you start to reach 10% from your full capacity, which in this case is 512 gigs, the phone and its photo app does seem to slow down a little bit. Other than that, in the last 6 months, the only area that I may have noticed a bit of a degress in performance compared to the previous generation, or an occasional glitch, was in the camera app. A lot of times with the iPhone, I just want to whip it out and take a photo. I usually just go into the lock screen and turn it straight to the camera, and occasionally, I would say once every month, the camera would take 10, 15 seconds to open up, or I'd have to just close it or try it again, and that was a little bit annoying, and I'm not really sure what causes that. And as someone who makes a lot of phone calls and talking to other people who also had the iPhone 13 and 13 Pro specifically, the reception when it first came out was worse than the previous model. I believe Apple did change the modem, but after the software updates and stuff, it did seem to improve quite a bit. But I did notice specifically on the iPhone 13 models, I think just when it came out last year, the reception was a little bit funny, and a lot of times when I've been making a phone call, it would start to have like this very robotic voice for no reason. Performance as a whole though, when it comes to like raw speed, efficiency, and just having all of my apps open at the exact same time and never going back to close them, has been really good. I haven't noticed any other issues aside from the few little quirks that are kind of associated with either the OS or the hardware, but I'm not exactly sure. My general like everyday performance has been extremely good on this iPhone, and I expect the future to really focus on the efficiency side continuously, as well as the image optimization, which has been a big push for Apple, especially in their lower price models. With the Retina XDR Pro Motion display on the iPhone 13 Pro and 13 Pro Max and the 120 Hz variable refresh rate, when you're just going through the general menus, I do find that it is quite noticeable. It just feels very snappy and smooth, and when you go to another phone, you do notice a small difference. The good thing though is that it is variable, so it doesn't drain the battery because it can reduce itself all the way down to 10 Hz at any given time, and a lot of the apps just simply don't use it. It's more so something that is in the general Apple menus and Apple's own applications. The display now has a peak brightness of up to 1200 nits, and Apple says it's 25% brighter outdoors when you have it in the auto mode, and that is something that I have noticed. But I mean, 25% is kind of that margin where you're not gonna like specifically notice or go out and buy a new phone just for that, but I do observe that I'm able to see things in like a very bright scenario better than I was before. So before we move on, I wanna give a huge thanks to the sponsor of this video, Newton, which is Canada's low-cost trading crypto platform. If you're based in Canada like me and want to get into investing in crypto or holding crypto, you might know that it is not always the easiest experience. There are a lot of different crypto trading platforms out there, but in terms of Canadian compatibility and being able to work with Canadian banks and transferring money into your crypto account, Newton is a really good solution for anyone who is looking to do that in Canada. They have an app on iOS and Android, and it allows you to buy and sell on any device with access to some of the best prices in cryptocurrency. They've made it very easy to add and remove funds by being able to just transfer through Interact e-Transfer, which is what I personally do, as well as wire transfers, and you can also connect your bank account to transfer funds seamlessly. You can also transfer cryptocurrency to and from your account at no additional cost, and they'll even cover the network fee up to $5. From now until May 6th, Newton is running 2 giveaways with a prize total of $200,000. The first giveaway has a total prize pool of $100,000 and is running on Twitter and Instagram, and the second giveaway is for existing users and also has a total of $100,000. So if you're in Canada and looking to buy Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, and many more, go ahead and check out Newton. I'm going to drop a link down below, and a huge thanks to them once again for sponsoring this video. So now moving on to the cameras, this is another area where Apple has kind of taken their own approach. The wide main camera now has 2.2 times more light, whereas the ultra-wide camera lets in 92% more light, and that is thanks to a larger sensor and also a lower f-stop. But the megapixel count is still 12 megapixels throughout, and that is where Apple has kind of gone their own direction, because in the world of smartphones nowadays, there are ones that can shoot photos in 100 megapixels, 50 megapixels, and that is just seemingly being that fight in the Android world that Apple has not hopped into, and that is totally fine. At some point, I do expect that the megapixel count is going to increase, but in terms of raw like photo quality for a smartphone, the iPhone does a great job through its software optimization, and I definitely noticed that difference in the ultra-wide camera. Sticking to the main camera first though, I record all of my like real vlogs and travel related stuff on the iPhone 13 Pro, and the stabilization is really good. The lighting, dynamic range, white balance, all does a really good job of picking up, but compared to the iPhone 12 and 12 Pro, the differences are not exactly night and day. If you're someone who just casually takes photos in broad daylight, it really isn't a reason to upgrade specifically, but when it comes to low light performance, that is where you're going to see a bit of a bigger difference. As for the video side though, you have the cinematic mode as well as ProRes, but those are functions that I haven't really used at all. I've just stuck to using the stock camera app to record video in 4K 24, and I've been pretty happy with it for quite a few years now. One of my favorite cameras though has always been the ultra wide. It just allows you to capture more in like a vlog setting, or if you're like taking pictures of real estate, it gives a nice large and grand illustration of the space. But in the previous generation, the f-stop was a little bit higher, and so it didn't allow as much light in, meaning the image quality was noticeably worse than the main camera by a decent margin. And especially when you're recording video and stuff, you need a lot of that light, and with an ultra-wide camera, the edges are often a little bit softer. In the last 2 years though, Apple has not only improved the distortion, the sharpness on the edges, but this year it allows more light, and that is one that I find myself still using all the time. So that is a pretty notable upgrade, I would say, on the 13 Pro. On paper, the ultra-wide camera is a 13mm focal length with an f1.8 aperture, a faster sensor, focus pixels, and also a 6-element lens, whereas the wide camera is a 26mm focal length with 1.9 micron pixels, an f1.5 aperture, and sensor shift optical image stabilization, which was first introduced on the Pro Max models of the iPhone 12, but this year it is on both the 13 Pro and the 13 Pro Max. I also like the fact that the two cameras on the 13 and 13 mini are now identical to the ones found on the Pro models. Photographic styles and characteristics is also something that Apple talked about at their event in September, and that is something that I've kept standard for now. If you guys don't know, photographic styles are settings and characteristics that you're able to set beforehand, but you're not able to change after the fact. It is baked into the image. And you have the options between like a standard, vivid, warm, cool, rich contrast. And I've kind of been between like rich contrast and standard, but as someone who edits all my photos in post anyways, keeping it either in standard or natural just seems to make the most sense. And I still take a lot of my photos on the iPhone in RAW. Taking a second to talk about the iPhones that are currently available though, because I feel like a lot of people watching this video are just trying to decide if they should get this phone now, maybe when the new iPhone comes out and the prices go down. But recently, the iPhone SE 3rd generation was announced, and that features the same hardware as the iPhone 8, but with the same processor of the iPhone 13 lineup. I know a lot of people were a little bit disappointed that the iPhone SE didn't have any like major changes in its camera, but to be honest, in broad daylight, the images compared to the iPhone 13 were actually similar enough. But of course, when you talk about like video performance and low light, it's a whole other story. I would say the iPhone SE in 2022 with its $30 price upgrade is still going to be a good deal for some people out there. As I said, the performance is definitely there, and it's a pretty like cut and dry experience, and I know Apple is going to sell a lot of it, but because the display is like nothing crazy in terms of brightness or refresh rate or size, as a matter of fact, the battery life is improved not only because of the older hardware, but also because of the efficiency of the A15 chip. If you look at the rest of the lineup though, with the iPhone 13 mini, the iPhone 13, the 13 Pro, and the 13 Pro Max, I would say the one I've been recommending the most this year is the iPhone 13 Pro because it has better battery life, it's a pretty comfortable size that matches the size of the iPhone 13, but at the same time, the cameras on the back definitely saw an improvement in the ultra wide, the main, but I would say the telephoto is one that I still don't use very much. If you're looking to save a bit of money though, the 13 also makes a very strong case. And if you're looking at the iPhone 13 mini, it is important that the battery life has also been improved because that was one of the biggest drawbacks of that particular model. But the 13 might also be the last year that you can get that iPhone form factor because there are rumblings that it won't be coming back. So now looking into the future, what are some of the things that we've been hearing and what would we like to see on the next generation iPhone 14? So for starters, I think a bit of a refresh in the design is going to be much appreciated. Some people find that the bump on the back is just way too big and there's a way to kind of blend it in a bit better. Personally, I have a case on my phone all the time, so I'm not really affected by that. But I do feel like after 2 years of the same design, we are kind of expecting something a little bit different, and one of the most notable ones is going to be on the front. From some of the images that have been going around the internet, the Face ID sensor and the front-facing camera is going to be integrated onto its own little island on the top here. The screen is going to flow all the way around, and it's just going to be a couple dots along there. Some people think it looks great, others think it's very ugly, but that is probably going to be the most notable design upgrade. The other elements though can be pretty straightforward, such as a new modem, upgraded chip, maybe it's more efficient, better battery life, but I would like to see some faster charging options. Maybe like 50% in 15 minutes, larger capacity overall, which seems to be like an upgrade of 1 to 2 hours each year, thanks to a combination of better processors that are more efficient, as well as larger batteries that they're fitting, paired with the fast charging. Even though there has been a lot of debate of whether Apple is going to switch fully to USB Type-C like they have on the iPad side of things, and also with Thunderbolt and all that, It does seem like the lightning port is going to stay, and I would say my opinion of that is mixed. If you asked me last year, I would have said the lightning port should definitely stay. All of my accessories are like that. But at the same time, when you take a look at the iPad lineup and how Apple has been increasing the transfer speeds year after year to like Thunderbolt and all that kind of stuff on like the MacBook and iPad line, I just feel like USB Type-C down the road is going to make a lot of sense. Under the screen, Touch ID is also on the top of my wish list, and on the camera side of things, sensor shift stabilization on the 0.5x ultra-wide camera is also on the top of my wish list, and the biggest one is probably optical zoom on the main camera. But otherwise, that is my 6-month detailed review of the iPhone 13 Pro and my impressions of it. And yeah, I mean, it's a good utility phone. I'm pretty boring in terms of what I do on my smartphone, so I'm not like out there looking for the craziest set of features. I'm not looking to play like games and all that, but as a utility that has a good